Hello and welcome to Might and Magic, Book 2, Gates to Another World, also known as simply Might and Magic 2, Gates to Another World, because, well, that part with the book was kind of dropped at some point around the development of Might and Magic 2, so yeah. Yes, so we are starting a new playthrough of Might and Magic 2. For those who are not following this very closely, Might and Magic 2 is the second game in the Might and Magic series. It's a direct sequel to Might and Magic 1's Secret of the Inner Sanctum. And just as its predecessor, it is a Western RPG game. Was developed back in 1988, which was 1 year later after the release of the first Might and Magic game. And the engine that this game uses is pretty much the same thing as in Might and Magic 1. Just with a bit of polish here and there. So, like in some of the other first videos, I will not be showing a whole lot of action this time. It will be on the second video, and instead here I will go over the details of the story in this game. As you may recall, if you have watched Might and Magic 1, Secret of the Inner Sanctum, our heroes have gone on an adventure in the land called Varn, and while just adventuring, they found out that the king of Varn, King Alamar, was in fact not who he said he was. Instead, the real King Alamar was trapped in the Castle Doom, and in his place was an imposter, whose name was Shelton, and he was an agent of the Ancients, but a rogue one. So instead of being a nice ruler, Shelton was a very cruel ruler and bred all kinds of monsters and levied taxes and other things like that, which made people very much, disappointed in all of these events, and so our heroes managed to confront the imposter and make him leave the world of Varn. So, in Might and Magic 2, everything starts off with the heroes from the first game going through the gates to another world, the title of the game. Yes, so first of all, what I want to do here is to give you the part of the manual of Might and Magic 2, which, of course, for a game released back in 80s, is something that is quite important. So this is the manual, and let me adjust the size of it. I guess this will be good. Kind of small because it's being recorded on a pretty small screen, but hey. So I will be reading through this part here, which is pretty much the history of Kron. Kron being another world mentioned in the title of the game, and that's exactly where our heroes are at. So, let's begin reading. Prologue. An account of Korag the Mysterious' unsettling disappearance, as told by his apprentice, Gwendon the Young. Yeah, Korag the Mysterious. You might remember him from the first game. He was a nice guy who actually helped think it was indirectly. I don't think they met Korak in person in the first game. But yeah, he was in the first game, so that's what matters the most. So, let's see. Wyndham the Young. Korak has always held many dire secrets, but recently he had shown signs of being outwardly distressed. This troubled me greatly, as what could disturb one so powerful and composed as Korak the Mysterious? That's actually a good point. He is very powerful. And his power actually comes from the fact that he is another agent of the Ancients, and he can use technology. Something that is not available to native inhabitants of both Varn and Kron. So, continuing on. Was he not only High Priest as well as being regarded by all as a most accomplished warrior, and being the most powerful Archmage other than King Kallon the Vanquished? He was all that the knowledge strived to be and what the ignorant claimed to be. Yeah, I guess so. He was the High Priest. Wait. He was the only High Priest, you say? That's interesting. And of course, he is a good warrior and a good mage. Although, I'm not sure if most of his magic comes from technology or actual magic. But then again, it's probably both, so yeah. Korak used to tell me stories of different, wondrous worlds with hideous monsters and mighty warriors. He once even mentioned that he came from another world. I thought his stories were mere fables or myths meant to entertain me. Little did I know that he spoke the truth, and that a problem would arise from his truth that would drive him mad. Yeah, well, he is not of this world, so that makes sense. One day, while I was working on translations of a sorcerer's scroll, Korak burst into the library with a harried look on his brow. He told me of an alien criminal from another reality who had escaped into our beloved Kron. Korak then promptly forgot that I was present and proceeded to curse and mumble profusely as he searched through the books for some lost text which contained a gleaming of information which might help him expel the dangerous alien. Being insatiably curious, I attempted to eavesdrop on the conversation he was having with himself. He spoke of Kron being out of alignment with other worlds, of a highly destructive alien being named Shelton, and of an anointed champion who could realign Kron before a horrific wave of fiery destruction would sweep across and destroy the land. Yep, so that means that Shelton has in fact arrived on Kron. Pretty much where all of the heroes from the first game happened to be. So, yep, things are continuing. So, after this foray in the library, Korak acted quite strangely during the next few days. He would lock himself in his private study for hours at a time. Frightful noises emanated from behind the locked door, and then, suddenly, they would stop. He would emerge, changed each time in some subtle fashion. He would enter the study after devouring almost an entire banquet by himself, and exit with an appetite as if he had not eaten in days. Other times he would be wan and pale from long hours of intensive research done in the library. He would then go to the study and exit in a few hours with a tan, as if he had just returned from Murray's Resort Isle, basking in the sun there for a week. Yes, the Murray's Resort Isle is something we will see in the game, and his strangeness is still strange, even from our perspective. But yes, he mentioned that Kron was out of alignment and that fiery death was incoming. And he is not kidding. It will be kind of a plot point later in the game. This weird behavior continued for almost a fortnight. One day he left his study after an unusually long session and immediately started screaming about the end of the world and how he could not stop it. Amazingly, he was covered in snow, and yet it was midsummer. He then looked about in desperation and withdrew a strange four-taloned claw which I had never even seen before. Korak then uttered a spell which caused a blinding glow of sheer power to envelop his body. He was terrible to behold, bathed in an eerie shower of what must have been pure ethereal energy, just standing there, exulting in his newfound might. Well, the fact that he's covered in snow probably relates to the fact that he can cast Town Portal, I guess? Or just create portals as he wishes. And yes, this Talon will also be a very major plot point. Seconds later, a clap of thunder shook the building and Korak was gone. I believe that he transported himself away in order to try to stop the mystifying doom which lay upon Kron. Unfortunately, I have my doubts. Maybe the spell of power was too much for Korak the Mysterious, and he brought about his own destruction. I do not know anything for sure. After all, I am now only an apprentice without a master to tell me if I am right or wrong. A week later, Lord Pinehurst visited and went into Korak's study. The strange, eerie noises started again, and Lord Pinehurst was gone. I entered the study and noticed that one of Korak's machines was missing. Next day, I received a sealed letter delivered by special courier from Lord Pinehurst. He wrote that he was fine, not to worry, and that I should travel to Castle Pinehurst to continue my studies. I go now and hope that this growing chaos in my life will soon end. So that is a teleporter indeed. I wonder what is missing. I don't recall a whole lot about the exact plot details of the game, so yeah. And actually, that said, I want to mention one thing about how I'm playing this. It's pretty much the opposite of how I played Heroes Chronicles. In that, in Heroes Chronicles, I had absolutely no idea about what the plot is, but I didn't know about the game mechanics quite well. However, here I do know quite a bit about the plot, because I've seen RPG's playthrough of Might and Magic 2, and also a bit of some of the other ones. None of them were finished as far as I know, and people are messaging me. So yeah, so I will be playing this half-blind, and that it's kind of blind because of my not being very familiar with how the things are actually working out in terms of gameplay mechanics, but I do know about the plot. Not everything, it has been a long time, but I do know some things. So anyway, next chapter here is the history of Kron. This is actually a very, very important document, because it has details on some of the things that, well, would otherwise be very puzzling in the later games as well. So, history of Kron. This being a synopsis, right, of the histories of Kron, as gathered by Korak the Mysterious and found in his study in the luxurious Palace Royale by Gwendon the Young. I, Korak, the Mysterious, have gathered these histories of the world aptly called Kron. Aptly called Kron? Why do you think it's aptly? Oh, come on. People are calling me. Right, so anyway... gathered the histories... yeah. Aptly called Kron through personal experiences gained by the use of magical artifact which allows travel through the very fabric of time itself. Yeah, the Talon does have something to do with time, and I think this will be explained here. At first there was only void, yet in the nothing something arose. An ethereal substance capable of supporting life came into existence. From the time of this forming shall I, as to all in Kron, reckon time. The shaping of this etherealness took well nigh 1 century to occur, and develop into recognizable form. Yep, so the creation of Kron, apparently, is that first there was just void, and then there was something ethereal for a century. So what's next? Next, water in vast amounts came from this order, and remained to mix with the ether. Strange beings arose out of this chaotic union. Elemental lords of great power warred for control of the waters. The greatest of these was powerful Aqualander, mightiest and most majestic of all the Water Kings. Preternatural fierceness, whatever that means, combined with uncanny intelligence allowed him to hold unquestionable dominion over all of the other elementals. He reigned supreme for 70 and a generation of years. Then turmoil erupted. Aqualander, we will be hearing that quite a bit. Yes, so after Ether, there was the time of the water elementals. And the lord of them is none other than Aqualander. Potent creatures from an unknown, mystical land charged into Kron with conquests of the brutal water lords as their goal. A battle which could last centuries began. Aqualander and his minions were taken by surprise, and the strange beings gained a foothold, which they would not release. Puzzlement and fear of the unknown swept through the ranks of the normally stolid water elementals. Who were these warriors who suddenly came from nowhere? They were spirits of the air come from afar to expand their empire. Their lord was terrible indeed, a creature of tumultuous air named Shalwind, who could call upon tremendous legions of vicious air elementals to blow back the shocked water lords. Air fought with water over a century until reaching a level of equilibrium which neither side could change. Yes, after the water elementals there were air elementals, and they battled the water elementals. Seeking to upset the deadlock and gain the momentum in the war against the air elementals, Aqualander charged his servitors to create an ultimate weapon. He received much more than he wanted. His vassals summoned forth incredibly powerful creatures of destruction that would remain under the Water Lord's total dominance. Fire elementals were issued forth. These hateful monsters' sole purpose in life was to destroy. That destruction, their like, will never be approached. They sucked the life out of the air spirits without mercy, forcing them to endure a slow, consuming burn until there was nothing left. However, the Fire Lords were few in number and could not totally destroy the Masters of the Wind. Yep, apparently, the Fire Elementals were created as a weapon for the Water Elementals. That's an interesting twist. So, the leader of the Burning Horde, Pure Nasty, Master of the Flame, disliked the iron-fisted rule of Aqualander and the Warlords. Any hesitation of a fire elemental in carrying out an order issued by a Water Lord would result in extinguishment. Pure Nasty waited, for he was patient, and even though he and his vassals chafed under the rule of the Water Elementals, they hated Shellwind and the Air Elementals even more. 80 years of servitude and war passed for the Fire Lords until Pure Nasty deemed the time proper for rebellion against Aqualander. Wanting only to escape servitude while still being able to crush the ranks of the despised Shellwind, the Master of Flame attempted to break away peacefully from the Air Elementals. At first they succeeded, but resentment and overconfidence built up in the legions of water. Are not the Fire Elementals our servants, brought forth by us to serve our heeds? Can we not crush them as we crush the Masters of the Winds? This the armies of Aqualander thought, forgetting that the might of the Air Horde must be fought once again without aid. Also forgetting that in order to extinguish a Fire Elemental, a Water Lord loses much of himself in the struggle that ensues. Shrewd Aqualander realized that the Warlords could not hope to end victorious in a war against both the Air and the Fire Elementals. However, his counsel fell upon deaf ears. What good is the voice of reason to an angry mob? For 50 years, water fought air and fire fought water and air fought fire and water. Battles were bloodthirsty, and allies were non-existent. Kron had transformed into a chaotic battlefield with no one group able to assert itself over the others. Yes, so basically, the Fire Elementals decided to revolt against their previous masters, the Air Elementals, and as such, the Air Elementals decided to fight against both the Fire and the... Water Elementals decided to fight against the Fire Elementals and the Air Elementals at the same time, which is, of course, something that they could not normally manage, and in this case, 3 parties were formed, all of which were pretty much in the same status as the other ones in terms of firepower, essentially, and they once again could not reach. No party could reach total dominion over the other parties, so they all had to share. But of course, it was war. And then came disaster. From places vaguely rumored to exist, came the most fearsome creatures yet. Emperors of Earth, they called themselves. They were led by Gralcor the Cruel. In one fell stroke, they invaded Kron and caused the petty struggles between water, air, and fire to come to an utter halt. Ancient enemies were forced to unite for survival against the new common enemy. At first, the Earth Elementals appeared invulnerable. 80 years and innumerable battles later, a method was found to stop them. Aqualander and the Water Lords would soak the Earth Elementals with a flood of water. Then Pure Nasty and the Fire Lords would bake the dissipated creatures into dry silt. Finally, Shellwind and the Air Spirits would lift the silt into the sky and spread all of the particles across the world, leaving the Earth Elemental utterly eradicated. Alas, the effort by the 3 elemental tribes was too late to stop Gralcor the Cruel and the Emperors of Earth. They had pulled together and formed a giant mass of earth and matter which floated upon water, was immune to fire, and which would not scatter as leaves upon the wind. For 20 more years, the elementals attempted to overcome the earth and landmass of Gralcor the Cruel. They failed miserably, and the Emperors of Earth assumed command of what would become Kron. So the last of the party were the Earth Elementals, and they were so powerful that they overwhelmed all three of the warring parties, and so they had to unite against the common enemy, which is quite interesting, and it kind of follows the long-term politics of some real-world countries, I would say. So, what's next? By the year 500, Grelkor and the Earth Elementals were busily constructing a fixed land area with the toil of their slaves. For almost 100 years, all of the elementals, water, air, fire, and earth, struggled to perfect the landmass. What they came up with is what we know as the physical land of Kron. Yep, apparently the Earth Elementals are the reason why there are landmasses in Kron, and since before that it was just water, there are quite a few oceans there. And it's interesting, does that mean that Earth Elementals enslaved water and fire elementals? That could be possible. That would explain why there were phoenixes enslaved in Masters of the Elements. Well, they kind of are used to that, I guess. To enslaving others. Anyway, let's continue. Rumor of Kron spread to other worlds somehow, and an inexorable, what does that mean? An inexorable flow of what were to the elementals small pitiful creatures began to populate the world of Grelkor in the 7th century. The creatures were of many different humanoid types, but they all had basic similarities and resistances, which enabled them to survive in Kron. Water beaded off them, air swirled past them, fire did burn them, but only under extremes, and mighty earth they trod upon. The humanoids were able to extract properties from each of the 4 elements' features and use it for their own benefit. But perhaps most important of all, they could weave magic. At first, there were few of these pathetic creatures, but they multiplied rapidly and spread across the landmass. The humanoids strengthened after years of toil and pain. Ambitions grew, and they attempted to make Kron their own. This aroused the attention of Grelkor the Cruel, and forced him into action. I wonder what they mean about that. Rumor of Kron spread to other worlds somehow. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because a Kron is in a cell. The rumor of it cannot spread because it is supposed to be created by the ancients themselves. So perhaps Korak did not want to disclose everything, or perhaps he did not know everything, or perhaps there is some other explanation to this discrepancy. I'm not totally sure. Well, either way, what's next? Unfortunately for the elementals, Grelkor acted too late. The humanoids had been in Kron for over 70 years and had acclimated themselves to all the difficulties which the elementals could produce. They had weapons and spells which could immobilize all but the most powerful elemental lords. Grelkor did not realize this and made a most fatal error. He attacked. He marshaled his forces for the obliteration of the feeble humanoids. The humanoids knew what to expect and lay a trap for the elemental forces. All of the most powerful spellcasters gathered on the Isle of the Ancients and combined their efforts to create an orb of power. This orb had a mystic receptacle, a 4-taloned claw. There was a talon for each elemental force, and alone that talon could control the elemental creatures it represented. The 4 talons could be combined to form a holder for the orb. This formed a weapon of incomparable power, which could guarantee the complete submission or destruction of any and all elemental creatures. Many tests were made in order to perfect this weapon. Gross mutilations and horrible deaths were the result of most of these. In the latter part of the 8th century there was a human male, weak in magic, but strong in courage, named Kron, who tested the orb and survived unmolested. Many humanoids died before this because of Grelkor's attack and the testing of the orb. Kron resolved to end it all immediately. He went to the tallest mountain in all of Kron alone. He then challenged the 4 elemental lords to do battle. Much damage to the land followed, including the transformation of the mountain into the crater we know as the Dead Zone. Kron, armed with the orange, glowing orb, emerged victorious, and then banished each of the 4 elemental tribes to a separate corner of Kron, and formed barriers to keep them imprisoned. Within each elemental zone, he placed the corresponding talon of the Mighty Claw, in the order of the elemental spirits: water, air, fire, and earth. He kept the orb for himself. Apparently, humanoids were somehow there, and they knew magic and were quite adaptable, and so they managed to stop the dominion of earth elementals and match all the elementals to separate corners of Kron. With the elemental forces banished from direct interaction with the humanoids of Kron, civilization evolved and everyone prospered. Kron gained much magic power due to his battle with the elementals and his frequent use of the orb. He became King Kron the Conjurer and ruled wisely for 30 or more years. Peace spread throughout the land. Education began of the young and living conditions improved. Communities formed and trade developed. People were happy and content. Then, in the mid-9th century, the elementals struck back. Unable to physically enter Kron and maddened at the elementals' defeat at the hands of a single puny human, Aqualander studied that which defeated him: magic. He had a great aptitude for sorcery and learned quickly by studying the humanoids who ventured near his realm. He gained particular skill in forming and summoning. Using this skill, Aqualander formed a fell creature of enormous girth and power. He filled it with life from many of his followers and endowed it with the most fearsome of weapons known to him: fire. He had created the first dragon, a creature of mindless destruction and incredible strength. This dragon was formed just outside the water barrier, and left Aqualander with the intent to destroy Kron and then Kron. Yes, apparently dragons were created by Aqualander. An interesting thing here. King Kron the Conjurer sensed the dragon's creation and the threat it posed. He sought it out to vanquish it and quell the elemental lords forever. He met the dark creature in the beautiful Savannah of Plenty. Unfortunately, mighty as he was, Kron had only the power of the now fatally glowing orb with him, and perished after a disappointingly quick battle. The dragon breathed barrels of flame and engulfed Kron entirely, consuming him in a bath of fiery death. Kron had attempted to cast a spell which would form a shield of water to protect himself, but the spell was changed as a last-minute surge of power from the orb went through Kron's body, and caused a flood to ravage the savannah. For all the might of the dragon, he could not fly without wings and was too heavy to swim. He died a slow death, powerless against the natural habitat of his master. After effects of the battle were numerous and disastrous. The Savannah of Plenty was destroyed and became the Quagmire of Doom, an area of great evil. However, it is rumored that their orb still exists somewhere in the Quagmire, though no one has ever found it. Dragons entered Kron through once closed corridors and wreaked havoc among the populace. Princess Lamanda, Callan's daughter, assumed a tentative command of the land. All of these factors led to regression and the ultimate downfall of the level of civilization which had been achieved. Now it is the 10th century and chaos reigns. Swords and sorcery have replaced law and order as the way of life. Monsters roam the lands of Kron freely and do as they please. Isolated areas hold out against barbarism, but are doomed to fall. All that remains of Kron's glorious past are old wives' tales of mighty warriors and wizards doing battle against evil hordes and of a tragic lord, King Callan the Vanquished. Now that I think about it, as they say that after King Callan was defeated, there was a downfall of civilization, could be that Korak is actually withholding the information about the ancients, and that it is possible that Callan himself was an ancient, and what they did is the fight that ensued there was actually the elemental manipulation. It is possible, yes. And the destruction after the defeat of King Callan was perhaps caused by all of the chaos that went into this, but it's not very likely. After all, why would they simply lose the level of civilization that they had before? The dragon was dead, and the barrier still did hold, so there is no real reason to. Except for, well, I mean, things like internal wars, or something like that, and countries developing, but it feels more likely that this has to do with the silence. But yeah, it's, I guess, open to interpretation. So here ends the story part of the manual. There are other things here, but nothing quite like that. But I have already talked for 40 minutes, basically. So I will stop here. And I will continue with some form of gameplay in the next video of the playthrough of Might and Magic Book 2, Gates to Another World. See you all